exercise to kind of start to understand, what are my needs? What am I trying to get at with my spending? In my impulse spending, it is connected to something, whether that be I am trying to gain approval, I'm trying to meet obligations, I'm trying to feel better about myself, I'm trying to spend on the fantasized version of who I want to be, which might be to meet some esteem needs. Really being able to create a pause here and identify, what is it that I'm trying to get at, can help us to reorient and maybe find some different ways of meeting those needs. It also has to do with understanding what type of impulse spender we are. Is it out of habit that we're spending? Is it out of stress or various emotions that we might be feeling? Are we maybe just shopping as an activity because it's something fun? I know I grew up going to the mall on the weekends as just something to do. And so I'm accustomed to doing that and might spend more than I intended to on the weekend as a result. Is it as the result of social influence? Is it that I see my neighbors having something that makes their life seem more efficient and I want that too? Or on social media, kind of getting to some of the root of what is prompting this spending and what do I want to see shift can be a good place to begin.
Totally makes sense. I do want to pause for just a moment because it occurred to me that one of the things I wanted to establish right here at the top is just a little bit of context. Can we take just a second and talk a little bit about your backstory and history and like how you and Jen came together and how this crazy helpful podcast became a reality?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am Jill, one half of the Frugal Friends podcast. My background is in social work. So I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I have and continue to work in the mental health field. And through my own kind of journey, personal finance journey, straight out of college, I, of course, had student loan debt and was working a job that paid me $24,000 a year. Even though that was about 15 years ago, it still wasn't a lot of money then. And it really caused me to need to look at, in what ways can I creatively meet my needs, even just some of my basic lodging needs, without needing to sacrifice this job that feels really important and purposeful to me. My husband and I then ended up living in an RV for a couple of years, just for affordable housing, not to be some like clickbait millennial couple who's traveling the nation, just to be able to afford the place that we lived in. However, it did include a road trip at one point down to St. Petersburg. I'm originally from Philadelphia. And it was while we were in St. Petersburg, Florida, that I met Jen. It happened because Eric, my husband Eric, and her were mutual friends on Facebook because they had met 10 years prior. And so my husband put out this message on Facebook, anybody in the St. Pete area want to hang out? Because he knew some people from having toured in bands in the past. And no one else responded, but Jen did respond because she felt bad for us that no one was taking the bait. So we ended up hanging out and becoming fast friends, talking about our personal finance journeys. My husband and I were in the process of paying off $60,000 of debt. She and her husband were also paying down debt and really finding connection and community over these typically stigmatized conversation, taboo conversations was so, so helpful. And it then kind of sparked this conversation of, what if we were to be able to help others have these types of conversations, be able to ask questions, not feel ashamed for it, be able to have light-hearted, fun talks and chats about money while we kind of encourage one another towards some of these goals. And the Frugal Friends podcast was born. I had no idea that people would actually listen. I thought it would just be helpful for Jen's blog. She was blogging about her debt payoff at the time. And I thought I would learn a little bit myself about personal finances. But we're about 6.5 years in. And as we mentioned at the top, 7 million downloads later, and a book. We just wrote a book called Buy What You Love Without Going Broke. So we really love to create this community and safe space that provides accessible personal finance content in kind of a fun, lighthearted manner.
Oh, it's great. And one of the things that you and I spoke about when we met a few days ago was just that I think a superpower of the way that you guys approach this topic, which is not common in
Mm.
my experience, is that you speak in a very relatable way about something that is very personal and or personal, and then also like frankly um, a little complicated to digest for a lot of people. So sharing your journey is a big deal, and not just because I'm a whatever crunchy community nerd. Like I really identify with the fact that you guys uh, speak about this stuff in a way that is very relatable because we all like have challenges that we have to try to figure out along the way.
And the information about finances can feel so gate kept and so mysterious as well. There's so many acronyms. And if you don't know the acronyms, it feels like you're outside the club and you'll never have access into it. And I think when we can kind of lower that barrier to entry and help people realize, oh, this can be learned, like all things, I can learn it. It's actually not that complicated. I just need the safe spaces and the people who are speaking kind of in the way that I enjoy to be spoken to help understand and be able to build this skill.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, shout out to Nick, who also is in Philly as we speak. So there's a lot of Philly represent happening today. I did want a quick sidebar and let everybody know that if you have questions for Jill, we'll probably pick them up here in a little bit, but you can feel free to drop those into the chat, and we'll also just grab those along the way.
I'll
I
get
did
ahead of
want
it for all my Philly people and just say, no, I do not have any relation to Nick Sirianni, the head coach
oh
of the Eagles. I mean, maybe
oh
there's a relation, but in case someone's looking at the
that's
last name, like,
this is I'm not local enough for that reference, but I bet Nick is.
the Philly
Okay,
people would be. Yeah.
that they will 100% know. Okay, so one thing I that occurred to me is like you guys talk a lot about these common sense topics that on the surface might not seem directly finance related, but to me
Mm.
they like seem to inform an overall mindset. Stuff like clutter and food waste and mindfulness. How do these ideas help to inform your greater financial perspective?
Mm. So, coming from my social work background, I view things as we are whole people, holistically. Kind of we are physical, emotional, mental, relational, financial. All of these aspects play a part in kind of the way that we perceive the world around us, the way that we operate within it. And there's this concept within social work called person in environment, PI for short, because who doesn't love a food acronym? And it's relating to this concept of we are people, individuals with our own experiences and understanding of the world around us and internal motivators. And we exist within a context, an environment around us, both on a macro, meso, and micro level. All of it kind of plays into our experiences and the decisions that we make. And so when we talk about all of these things that seem adjacent to our money, it's recognizing that finances aren't just this piece sitting out here in the atmosphere. They are integrated, whether or not we realize it. The things that we experience relationally, emotionally, mentally impact the decisions that we make with money, and vice versa. The experiences that we have with money might inform the way that I'm going to engage with the community around me. And so when we can recognize this, what it means is any good beneficial decisions and changes that we make in any aspect of our personhood is going to be beneficial for our money. So that's a really encouraging concept. But also, there are things that we can actively be doing that will help us financially. I think you mentioned simplification or decluttering of our physical spaces. This is about curating our environments to be able to uphold and sustain some of the habits that we're creating around beneficial money management. So we've noticed that when we have a cluttered or chaotic environment, it can impact the decisions that we make. It can lead to overwhelm, it can lead to decision fatigue, it can lead me to making impulse decisions that maybe I wouldn't have wanted to make if I could have been in a more peaceful, kind of competent framework. There was an interesting study done, actually, we mentioned in the book, on people who perceived their kitchens to be chaotic and cluttered, made more poor food choices made poorer nutritional decisions for themselves versus those who perceive to be in control of their kitchen. Their kitchen is not overwhelming to them. And a lot of that has to do with perception, even like that's a really key word in there. And so we're not talking about everybody needs to have some sort of minimalist aesthetic, but to be able to feel like our space around us has some degree of peace and calm and kind of is an environment for us to be able to make good, solid decisions. Not only could we then make better decisions with our food, but better decisions with our spending, right? If we feel overwhelmed, the last thing we want to do is implement on our meal plan. We just want to go out and get some quick Chipotle. And that's okay sometimes, right? We want to be able to pay for convenience as it suits our needs. But if we're seeing sometimes these are patterns happening over and over again, and they're not benefiting our bodies, they're not benefiting our finances, then how can we make some shifts here? And sometimes the lowest hanging fruit is curating our external environment, our physical spaces, to be able to help support the decisions and the habits that we want to be creating around our money.
Makes sense. Similarly, I think, and you kind of touched on it here, but it's like this seems to be a metaphor that runs a little bit somewhat through um, the conversations that you guys have a lot. And it's the idea of there being this like sort of reservoir, or like I'm just going to call it a bucket of certain things that we need. And like the idea, like, so I'll give you an example. You talk a lot about willpower, right?
Mhm.
And so the idea that we sort of have this reservoir or bucket of willpower that we have a limited amount of, and that by sort of overutilizing it in one area, we actually have less of it for other areas. Can you speak to that a little bit in relation to how people think about their budgets and execute their budgets?
Mm. So often we'll use this concept of willpower both in kind of diet culture as well as budget culture. There's a lot of crossover that if we can just buckle down, knuckle down, however, whatever it is, you know what I'm
Either
saying?
works. Yeah.
Yeah, grin and bear it and implement our willpower that we'll be able to have this perfect diet, this perfect exercise plan, this perfect budget. And in reality, we're human and we crave spontaneity, and every day is different. And we are dynamic, flexible beings where things that get thrown at us, and we might throw a plot twist. And so things can't work out perfectly. And our willpower in those circumstances will often run out. We will get to the end of ourselves. Not that, willpower is a fine concept. I think it's important to kind of understand our ability to sustain a habit or a decision, but I think it also needs to recognize and pair that with just the ways that we operate. Some of our typical cognitive biases, our needs, the ways in which we might be drawn to impulsive decision making, and not work against those things, but work with them. And so when it comes to budgeting, we like to call it a spending plan. Not that we don't use the term budget, but we think sometimes that can have a negative connotation to it. It can feel like deprivation. And if we attach a new word to it, maybe it can give us some fresh perspective. So we call it a spending plan, but it's not where we encourage people to begin. A plan, a spending plan, a budget is just that. It is a plan. And in order to be able to implement and execute upon a plan, we need to have the skill sets to be able to support that. And what that means is our habits, our views of money, our understanding of ourselves, our understanding of how we're decision making, how we're operating in the world around us before we even begin to make the plan or implement on the plan. So, in order to frame this, one of the things that we talk about a lot is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I'm making a triangle because it is a triangle. What a great shape. We love it. And I'm sure many of us are familiar with this. It was developed by American psychologist Abraham Maslow to define our needs as humans. And so at the bottom levels, we've got our basic needs. So this is food, clothing, shelter, safety, stability. And then above that, we've got some of these higher needs of love and belonging, connection, self-esteem needs, followed by self-actualization needs. And self-actualization, I think we can get this one muddled a little bit. It's not reaching some version of nirvana, but it is an ability to be able to exercise our potential, feeling as though we are able to set our hands to the things that are life-giving to us. We are being creative. We are spontaneous. Even some of those things are some of those higher needs. And so what we've realized is, of course, we spend to achieve those lower level needs. We've got to buy our housing, our food, our transportation. But also, we will spend to meet our higher needs as well. We will spend to achieve self-esteem. We will spend to experience connection and belonging with people. We will spend to experience self-actualization, whether or not we need to. Sometimes we do. Again, spending's not wrong, spending's not bad, spending's a skill. But we are so conditioned and socialized and trained to throw money at our problems, to buy solutions to things, that this is just kind of on autopilot for us, that we will spend to achieve connection with people. Just as an example, I was talking with somebody recently who in looking and digging deeper into some of her spending, she realized that she's been spending a lot prompted by Instagram ads or influencers, and recently made a purchase of clothing that looked really good on this influencer. She liked the aesthetic that they were giving off. She purchased it once she looked deeper in order to achieve belonging. That she saw these people wearing this, certain dress or skirt or whatever it was, and wanted to kind of be a part of that club, so to speak. And didn't actually like the way that the dress looked on her, but realized I actually purchased this to get at some of this connection need that I have. That takes a lot of that kind of internal work to even recognize, and some courage, but to realize, okay, I have this need for relationship and to feel like I belong. What could I have done instead? And realizing I could have just called up friends, or I could have gotten together with some people in my neighborhood, or I could have, phoned my sister instead of purchase this dress that I don't actually like. It doesn't look good on me. I think she was able to return it, so that's great. But some of this work ahead of time can then help to inform the plan that we create, to be able to fill in the gaps on what are my needs? What are some of the ways that I spend to get after those needs? What can I replace that with? But also, what do I feel really good about? So in this way, we can kind of have a yes list and a no list. The things that I can easily say no to because I realize they're not actually getting me closer to the things that I need or want or value. But these things I can say really easy, confident yeses to, and build out this budget or spending plan around certainly the income that I have coming in. We have to base this in reality, but then be able to filter that through. How do I want to get closer to some of these esteem needs, these love and belonging needs, these self-actualization needs in free or low cost ways? And then how do I want to spend on these things?
Well, and one of the things that you guys have talked about, that we don't have to go all the way down the rabbit hole on this, but I am kind of curious. It's related. You talked about the influence that your childhood has on your adult spending
Mm.
habits. Like, that's a real thing. So, any advice you like? It feels like part of the equation here is just being open to being honest with yourself about like where you come from and why you value the things that you value. What are your recommendations there?
Absolutely. I think this corresponds with the concept of just understanding ourselves better. So not only understanding our current spending habits, but understanding our past spending habits and relationship with money and understanding of money. So for me, I grew up in a lower middle class household. At times, I was on food stamps in high school. And so money kind of was this, sometimes you have it, sometimes you don't. When you have it, you either hoard it or you spend it right away because you don't know where it's coming from again in the future. And this now in adulthood, the way that this is impacting me is that I can veer more towards this scarcity mindset where I want to hoard whatever money comes in. And I have a really hard time defining enough. How to know when I've got enough in my sinking funds, enough in my emergency fund, enough just as a cushion in my checking account, which can keep me from investing more. Because as I reach the next milestone, it's like, ooh, but what if this catastrophe happens? And I kind of have this all or nothing thinking, this catastrophizing that can happen of I never want to find myself without, like I'd experienced in childhood. And so there are aspects of this that can be really helpful for me to know what is this and where did it come from? And it can inform the decisions that I want to make going forward. What of this is beneficial to me and what of this is not beneficial to me? So we want to ask these questions with no judgment, a lot of neutrality. One of the ways that we can do that is by practicing curiosity through avoiding the why question. Not that we have to throw out the question why altogether, but when it comes to personal finances, it can put us on the defense. It can elicit automatic fight mode in us where we feel like we have to justify things of why do I always do this? Why can't I stick to a budget? Why did I spend so much, right? Instead, what is it about this type of decision that makes me sweaty? What is it about this spending that I'm trying to get at here? Is there a deeper need that's happening beneath this? What of my childhood might help me to understand the way that I'm engaging with money now? So kind of just getting curious in this way about how did I view money growing up? What did my parents or caregivers teach me about spending, saving, investing, if anything? What did I pick up from in their actions? How do I carry that with me into today's money management circumstances? And especially if we're managing money with a partner, these can be really informative questions to be asking as well, because so often it's not about the math. There's so much more going on underneath the surface between, yeah, our past experiences, our current ways of behaving, our current stress levels can inform our financial decisions. So, of course, understanding where we've come from can inform who we are now and can help us to make better decisions for going forward.
Makes sense. Okay, we've kind of talked around this a little bit, but I want to make sure that I ask you directly, like, what is the money management holy trinity?
Yeah, it's simple. I think we can complicate finances so much. And not to say that there's not nuance and there's not, deep dives that you can take, but really managing our personal finances includes three things. That's income or earning, spending, and saving slash investing. We kind of categorize that under kind of one umbrella. And so, if we can understand these three components and the ways that they interact with each other, we can become really good at managing our money. And of course, it's going to first need to start with that first one, the income or earning, that this creates the parameters or the context for the rest of the categories. And when we look at our income and our earning, what we take home each month, not only is this the context for our spending plan, but it can also inform us on whether or not we want to be looking at ways to earn more. If as we look at these other categories, we see that we might be coming up short, or there's more goals that we want to be achieving financially, that maybe there could be ways to look at earning more. Earning also connects with our need for fulfilling work. And maybe this can inform the ways in which we are looking at what can we be doing that feels purposeful to us, that might be hitting on some of those higher needs of esteem and self-actualization and respect. So that's an important category to kind of take an inventory of. But of course, there's numbers that are going to come along with that then inform our spending and then our saving and investing. And so being able to filter through our both fixed expenses as well as discretionary expenses. And even though fixed can sound like it's unchanging, we love to push against this a little bit and say, yeah, you've got your housing, you've got your transportation, you've got the things that are kind of stable in the spending plan, but that doesn't mean that they can't be questioned. Is the place that you're still living in a good beneficial option? Would it be better to rent or buy? I'm not going to say that one is better than another depending on any individual circumstances. Is the way that I'm getting around, my transportation, still meeting my needs? Do I want to be putting as much money towards this as I am, or are there ways to be able to decrease this category? We really love to look at the heavy hitters of spending when it comes to optimizing our finances. And those are housing, food, and transportation. Those are the top three spending areas that the majority of us have. And so, if we can make really good, wise spending decisions in just those three categories, we can almost eliminate the need to worry so much about the impulse spend here and the random late night Instagram purchase there if we're making really conscientious decisions on our housing, food, and transportation. And then we're filling in the gaps from there with our other discretionary, kind of not fixed, that might look different month to month spending and have the different categories for that. For me personally, I really just have a miscellaneous category for that. I've got my food, my dining out, my gas, and my miscellaneous. And that allows for some of that spontaneity for me, that I'm able to make decisions around the parameters of, okay, I have this amount of money set aside for miscellaneous things, but I get to choose to spend it how I want to spend it. And also considering the ways that we're saving, both for an emergency fund as well as sinking funds, and the ways that we are investing. We love to encourage people to automate their investing, even if it's just a little bit of money to set it and even forget it. So that's, the 401k, the Roth IRA, taking the employer match, maxing out these accounts can really set us up for success financially in the long term.
Well, and this is I didn't necessarily intend this part as a plug, but like one of the things that not just the sequence software, but there are a lot of different softwares that will help you to set money aside, even beyond the investing idea, like just setting up emergency funds, or like just helping with those bumps in the road, setting up your kids' 529s, like whatever the thing is. There are ways to set that money aside. And one of the things that we talked about a few days ago when you and I chatted was the idea, and I guess this kind of maybe tangentially goes back to the dieting thing, but it's like I talked about how one of the reasons, in my opinion, this is just my uninformed opinion, but one of the reasons that I think that Diet Coke is popular is because after a while, if you if you're not drinking Coke and you switch to Diet Coke, it's like it tastes the way that it tastes, and you don't miss what isn't there anymore. And in a way, sometimes setting money or automating and setting some things aside can feel a little bit like retraining your pathways. One,
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true. It's just sort of my weird observation, but it's like our minds are funny in the way that they adapt. Um, I did want to ask you, and this feels kind of related, but it's not something that you guys have directly talked about, but the idea of time, right? So
Mm.
it's like with some of these changes and the evolution of your approach to saving and budgeting, or attacking debt, or whatever the task may be, like how do you recommend that folks consider how much time something has and how patient we are, and like what that process looks like?
Yeah. This is such an important question, and I love that you're going here with it, because we will often say that time is our only non-renewable resource. It's the only thing that we actually have truly limited. is time, right? Of course, most of us don't have unlimited cash, but in theory, you can make more money. You can engage in some of these other resources that you have. Physical space can look different, finances can look different, but time is the only thing that is really running out. And I don't say that to be like fear mongering with it, but I think it is important when we're looking at the whole picture of, like we talked about already, managing all of our resources well, that it's important to look at what things are costing us in terms of time investment. And even what we can be expecting from ourselves over the span of time. And so this is one of the reasons that we say paying for convenience can make sense for some people in certain seasons of life, and depending on what your particular values are, to be able to spend, if you're a parent with young kids at home and you're working and there's a lot of things going on, how limited time is, that it could be worth your while to be paying for the takeout food or the meal delivery service or the house cleaner, because it helps you to reclaim some of your own time and put it towards the things that are actually most important and valuable to you. And so this also plays into kind of the earnings conversation that we've had already of, what do I want to be putting the majority of my time, energy, and attention to? Is this work fulfilling for me? Is it earning me what I need to be earning? Are there things that I can be considering here? Are there shifts that could be made to get me closer to whether the earning, the goals, the learning, the potential that I want to be reaching here? Because it really, you're giving so much of yourself. I also think, and this is a little bit adjacent to this, but I do want to mention it, that it also takes us so much time to achieve financial goals. I think we can be sold this idea that people achieve overnight debt payoff or making millions in the stock market. And in reality, for the average person, for most of us, these things take time. We do better with time in the market rather than timing the market. And so these small, slow, and steady shifts that we make in our habits, these good spending habits of automating investing, automating saving, only, spending what we're earning or below it, are the true things that are going to help us achieve some of these goals. For me and my husband, we paid off $60,000, but it took us 7 years. That is not clickbaity. You're not going to see
No,
some internet article, bragging about that. It's not remarkable. But for many of us, our financial achievements are not going to look remarkable on paper, but it will be beneficial to us as we continue to take the small steps towards them. So, yeah, time is limited in one sense, and we really want to be optimizing it as much as possible and looking for some of the ways that we can be efficient with our time, but also recognize that some of these lofty goals will take time, and that's okay. Even if we read that some people paid off six figures of debt in 6 months, that doesn't have to be our story. Slow and steady can win the race too.
the marathon, not a sprint, right? So
Yeah,
so to speak.
but even a marathon can be finished in a weekend, a day for the good
Sure.
runners, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so some of this is even much, much longer than that. And so creating the things that are going to help to sustain us along the way is what's important.
Totally makes sense. And I feel like I tell this story about every third interview, but there was a study that was, it might have been commissioned by uh, Warren Buffett and Berkshire Hathaway, or maybe it was
Mm.
just something that he talked about, but they were talking about like specific to investing and patience. Like he specifically talked about like when the bottom of the market dropped out in 2008, and they did a study on basically what people's reactions were, and the people who ended up having the best returns were not the ones who freaked out and pulled all their money out of the market when everything looked terrible. It was people that either forgot that
Mhm.
they had money in sitting investments or died. And it was like, those were the ones who had the best return. Now, if
Yeah.
the last one, it doesn't really help you at this point. But the other, like that idea of patience, he also has famously said, don't have any investment that you wouldn't hold on to for 10 years, which is, I think, a
Mm,
pretty interesting patient um, mindset, but
yeah.
lots to take away there. Okay. So with 8 days until
Mhm.
Christmas, for those who celebrate, is there anything that we can do in the remaining week that we have to still try to have as frugal holiday season as is warranted?
Absolutely. So, similar to creating just an overall spending plan for a month, we can create a spending plan specifically for the holidays. So, even now, with about a week to go, we can be looking at how much money do I have to spend on these celebrations, whether that be gifts, food, activities, outfits. People love to buy all the clothing this time of year, too, and creating the parameters for that. We would not encourage anybody ever to go into debt to create a magical holiday season. It's not necessary. We can still enjoy some of these cherished activities without overextending ourselves financially. So I would really encourage people to look at the realities of the money that's available and then begin to figure out, how do we want to allocate this? I like to encourage people to have two different lists. So the list, first of all, just start by saying, what all do I want to be spending on? What are the activities that I want to go to? What food do I need to be taking? What extra food am I going to need to be cooking? What gifts do I want to purchase? Write it all out and just kind of everything that you would ever want to do. Then go through that list and align it with the money. Is there enough money to be able to do all of these things? Chances are probably not. So then we can look through and say, well, what can we weed out from here? What is it okay for me to say no to? What can I opt out of? And what can I replace those things with? We're not just talking about deprivation and saying no. We're also talking about identifying and problem solving and getting creative on, how can I meet some of these needs, maybe in free or low cost ways? So that can include looking at your city's webpage for free activities that are coming up. Looking at, we love Facebook events. There's always something going on Facebook events, or create your own. Have people over for a potluck or just a fire pit night or some desserts and beverages or BYO, anything, so that you're not spending a ton of money even on hosting. When it comes to gift giving, I think really recognizing that it is better to give a thoughtful gift, even if it's free, than a tacky gift. No one just wants to receive a gift just out of obligation. And so I think recognizing that there are ways that we can give to people without spending money, that could include just a thoughtful, encouraging card or note, or even letter to someone on the back of a picture of the two of you that you print out. So it's something that can spark a memory and share some encouragement with them. You can invite a person out to some of these free activities. My husband and I just went to a free Christmas concert this past weekend at a coffee shop, and that was so fun and enjoyable and magical, and we didn't spend any money. And then also, I think we can destigmatize the idea of regifting or giving pre-owned gifts, whether they're bought on Facebook Marketplace or the thrift store or a consignment shop, or you shop your own home. Or is there a book that you've already read that you really enjoyed that you know a friend is going to like too? Wrap it up. Do you have indoor plants that you could propagate and pop into a pot that you already have on hand or a pot that you thrift? Can you make some consumables, whether that's some infused olive oil or a spice blend or some fudge? It doesn't have to be the typical Christmas cookie. There are ways that we can be generous and give and show people that we love and care about them without overextending ourselves financially.
By the way, thoughtful gift givers have the best reputations. Like I know people like, and I just personally tend to think of them independently of the cost of whatever it is that I get. I just know that they create opportunities to remind me that they're aware of who I am, which is really nice. Okay,
Yeah.
similarly, with the time that we have left, I did want to ask you about 2025. Everybody
Mhm.
comes back with new vigor after the new year, and we're ready to. I heard you guys share a stat that I thought was really interesting, and I guess it kind of bears out that like most people tend to stick with their New Year's resolutions for 3 weeks.
Mhm.
Um, what are your thoughts about how you like what can you do to prep for 2025, or what would you recommend to do that?
Yeah, yeah, you're right. By January 12th, usually people kind of like peter off. And I think that that has to do with not having the skill set to support some of these lofty goals that we have for ourselves. So I think really beginning with an understanding of self and some of the skill sets that we want to be honing in on can be helpful for us. So, one of the things I didn't mention before, but related to the hierarchy of needs, is the four F's. So we talk about this in our book as well, that this has kind of helped to inform our understanding of what are our higher values, at least for the majority of us in kind of the Western world. Studies and research and surveys have shown that for the majority of us, we all kind of value the same thing. And they are four F's because we love alliteration. They are family, friends, faith, and fulfilling work. That usually these are the things that we want more of, and oftentimes what our spending is trying to get us more of. And so, if we can start the new year off looking at these four things, the areas in which we are feeling fulfilled, the activities that are helping us have more time with our family and friends, the spiritual practices that we are engaging in that are life giving to us, whether or not we're able to set our hands to fulfilling work. And that doesn't need to be our careers or the jobs that we have, it could be volunteer work, it could be some of our hobbies that we're doing, you name it. These four F's are a really great place to start. How am I engaging in these categories in meaningful ways? What do I want to keep going with? And what do I want to incorporate more of? This then can help us understand our finances a little bit more. How do I want my spending to align with more engaging times with friends and family, more, fulfilling faith and spirituality practices, more fulfilling work? This can help to form the foundation for creating a plan that can be sustainable over time. So the four
Amazing.
F's, I think someone's asking me to repeat them. They're family, friends, faith, and fulfilling work. And so engaging in those things, asking ourselves those questions can help us to then fill in the gaps with our spending plan.
Amazing. Thank you. I have two questions left for you, unless
Yeah.
unless our the folks who are watching along have anything to share. You guys can drop that into chat and we'll pick it up. But one is for those who don't know, what is bill of the week?
So, on our podcast, Frugal Friends, we put out episodes 2 times a week, Tuesdays and Fridays. And in every episode, we have a segment called The Bill of the Week. And it happens about halfway through the episode where callers will call in their bill of the week. And it is vague for a reason. It can be anything bill related, a bill people paid off, a bill they don't mind paying, a person named Bill, a duck bill, the Buffalo Bills. Nothing's off limits. And our listeners have been so, so creative with their bills of the week. And we love listening and responding to them. Sometimes we get tips and sometimes we just laugh along.
That's great. And then the last question that I have for you is, where can folks find the book? Like, let's plug the book, and then where, if folks have questions for you guys and they want to reach out, where's a good place to do that?
Yeah, buywhatyoulovebook.com is a place you can purchase the book called Buy What You Love Without Going Broke. And it really is what we're talking about here, values-based spending, teaching spending as a skill, and the habits and lifestyle shifts that we can incorporate to sustain long-lasting, beneficial personal finance management.
Amazing. Well, Jill Siriani, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. Really excited to download all of the knowledge here, and then go back and revisit some of the discussions that you and Jen have had over time. I wish you many, many more multiples of 7 million downloads along the way.
Thank you.
And thank you.
Exponential growth.
Yeah, exactly. I hope you
Yeah.
guys have a terrific holiday season, and I wish you great success. And thank you again for spending a little bit of time with us.
Thank you so much, Kevin. This was such a blast, and thanks for all your thoughtful questions.
Oh, it's my pleasure. You guys make it easy.
Mhm.
I will add that once this recording compiles, Jill, I'll send you a copy. But for those
Cool.
of you guys who are watching the stream or who sat in with us today, we'll also post that in the Discord community in our event recording section. But for now, this is our last event of the year. Thank you so much for spending some time with us, and wish you guys nothing but high fives along the way.
Thanks. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Bye, guys.